Welcome to the Analytics Dynasty. I'm Jordan McNamara, and I wanted to detail today why I love Justin Jefferson. And this is one of the tools we have over at Analytics Dynasty. It's the player comparison engine, and basically it allows you to go through and do a whole bunch of searches, right? So it allows you to do a whole bunch of different research, build your own comps, which is really helpful in terms of going ahead and looking at players, how they compare to players in prior years, and use some different features. So one of the things that I really like to do is to go through, look at what a player's ADP is currently, what their points per game was last year, maybe throw in a couple metrics, and then I want to solve for like, hey, tell me how this player is going to look in terms of his ADP next year, or tell me how he's going to look in terms of his points per game this year. What does that really look like? And that'll give you a great ability to look at both production and what we can expect from a market value perspective. So you get both angles on it. It's really, really helpful, and it allows you to build your own comps, do your own research, and you can use the tool to look at different players. So here's what we did. So we throw in, and again, I have a whole list of, I got a video up on top here that shows you, we walk through a whole bunch of players on it, and then I got an explanation of all the metrics here we use up above. Come down here to the engine. Again, you're picking your player. So I picked Justin Jefferson, and what do I want to compare, right? So these are the stats that I want to look at, use him to find players that look a lot like him, and then tell me what they're going to do in the stats we're going to analyze, right? So I want to use guys that have ADPs this year similar to his, right? So that's positional ADP. So that tells you where he is at a position. So wide receiver 1 currently. I want to look at last year's points per game. So that's Y minus points per game. So this year, -1 is last year. And that's the points per game from last year. And then I want to look at last year's yards per route run, which is a metric that I really like to look at. So again, receiving yards, -1. So year 1 is last year, yards per route run, and it'll allow you to use that feature. And then what do I want to look for? So here are the things that I'm trying to basically solve for, that I want to know the answer to, right? So I want to know what his ADP is going to look like next year. So that's positional ADP Y2, right? So I'll tell you where he's going to rank in the position next year. It's going to look at the 10 closest guys to him and tell you what they look like. And then we want to find out what he's going to do this year in terms of points per game, right? So that's Y points per game. So here's what we have. We don't have a lot of good comps, which is interesting because he's such an outlier. So what you'll see is this last column over here, it's EUC. That's actually short for Euclidean distance. Basically, it's how far away a player is in terms of the comps, right? So the bigger the number gets, the further away they are as a comp. Justin Jefferson doesn't have a lot of close comps. So you might see in a typical comp set of a different player that looks a lot more traditional, that has a lot more similarities in terms of players that have done stuff that he has done. You might see 10 of them have as about the Euclidean distance from Justin Jefferson that the number 2 guy has. So it's AJ Green. So you might see, all of the guys that are comps for someone very traditional. I don't know, if you pick someone like Damian Harris, for example, like you might have a lot of players that really look like him historically. And we go back to 2008 with our comps. This is basically telling you that Justin Jefferson is a huge outlier. Like those numbers are very big in terms of when you go and dive into this. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from this. So we throw these stats in, it gives you a little flavor for how he did basically in an efficiency perspective and a production perspective. And lo and behold, like his comps are outrageous, right? So the closest guy that looks like him is Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr. outperformed him a little bit in terms of yards per route run and points per game. They both came out to be number 1 overall in positional ADP. Next year, his positional ADP was 1 and his points per game was 21.29. So that sort of shows you he basically lived up to the billing, right? Other comps in this, AJ Green, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, right? So we're looking at 4 guys that are on Hall of Fame tracks. We'll see a little bit with some of the injuries about AJ Green, sort of where he puts that. Amari Cooper is basically the next step down from that. And then you look at guys, you get Michael Thomas and you get Des Bryant, Keenan Allen, and Michael Crabtree. Again, those guys are getting far away. And if you just look, like, you can see the difference, right? You can see Des Bryant scored, over 5 points less than Justin Jefferson, right? His yards per route run was approaching 1 yard per route run worse, right? So you're getting pretty far away in terms of comps. He doesn't have a lot of good ones. And again, the ADP massively different. He was Justin Jefferson's 1, he's 9. Like, that's a big difference, much bigger difference than you would say between like 8 and 16 or something like that. Like, that difference is a huge, huge difference in terms of when you're looking at the historical odds. So as you'll see, the numbers over here, they're they end up being very, very big because Justin Jefferson is such an outlier. So you come down here, you look at all the comparisons. So all his comparisons average out. They were 6.5 in ADP. Justin Jefferson's 1, so he's better than basically all the comps. Their average points per game is 15.2, and his was 16.89. Their yards per route run 1.99, so that's really, really good. 2.66 was his, so he just smashes. And again, I'm comparing guys that are him in terms of matching experience. So this is all guys year 2 in the league. You could change between age and stuff too. I should typically choose experience because I think it matters a little bit more for what we're looking at. And you'll see, I think he's going to project higher than this, but you just look, he's a top 10 ADP. Again, that is including guys that were much further down the position than he is right now too. I tend to lean a little bit higher on the guys up at the top, but you look at him, 15.5 in terms of points per game. Again, I think he projects pretty much consensus across the board better than that. When you look at the other thing, I think is really interesting to look at guys that actually were at or better than their ADP over the next year. So basically that improve from year 1 to year 2, you get basically pretty close. Almost all of them do, except for the guys down here at the bottom that are really far away from him. So you look at the closest comps. Odell Beckham Jr. stayed at 1. AJ Green stayed at 2 from year 1 to year 2. Julio Jones improved from 4 to 3. Mike Evans went from 5 to 7. So again, still a top 7 wide receiver. Amari Cooper went from 6 to 5. So he improved. Michael Thomas went from 7 to 4. So he improved. And then you get Des Bryant, and some of the other guys fell. And there was some injury related stuff too with, I think Crabtree was injured. I think Keenan Allen was actually injured too. So you get some of that stuff that sort of shifts it. But you look, this is a set of comps that it's an elite set of comps over a long period of time. And it's outstanding, right? So that's the really the argument, I think, for Justin Jefferson. When you look at this set of comps, like, you don't really do better than this. And they're not even, a lot of the really good comps to him don't even compare. So just to give you an idea of sort of how elite his profile is, that's just one of the tools we have at Analytics Dynasty. It's just made me, fall in love all over again with Justin Jefferson. Like, this is the reason why I think he's the wide receiver 1. All right, well, that'll do it for this. Just this brief update. You can go over to Analytics of Dynasty. You can subscribe. I have the information in the bottom here of the video, so you can go check that out and compare it over at and subscribe over to Analytics Dynasty. You can do all your comps. You can just search, spend hours and hours. Some of the reaction to this from subscribers was like very addicted. Hard to put down, those sorts of things. It was very complimentary, and people really enjoyed it and got to do a lot of fun things with looking at comps and looking at this stuff, and really can deep dive and use some different experiences. So I'll probably do a series of these so you can take a look. Until next time, continue embracing the variance, and we will talk again very soon.